of Programs for the U.S. Black Chambers. And as you all know, I'm sure you've joined many of our webinars before. We operate under 5 pillars of service: advocacy, access to capital, contracting, entrepreneurial training, and chamber development. And so today we're really hitting on 2 of these pillars. You're here today as part of a training session, but we're also focused on access to capital. We know that it's critical in order for Black businesses to grow, for them to be able to have access to capital. And that means a number of different things. Some of what you may see these days are grants that have been available just because of what's been happening in this pandemic. But now it's really time to kind of pivot back to the traditional lending arena. And when we talk about that, what we want to do with you here today is to really share a great resource, a great organization whose sole emphasis is to help Black businesses achieve the financing that they need. The African American Alliance of CDFI CEOs is a national organization of 20 plus CDFIs across the country. Those CDFIs are Black owned, are led by Black owned CEOs. And they understand the challenges that we have continued to face as Black businesses when it's time to look for financing. And so we're going to spend some time today talking about, really the role of CDFIs, how it differs from traditional bank financing, where you can locate a CDFI in your area, and how best to engage with both USBC as well as those member CDFIs within the African American Alliance to better help you serve your growth and financing needs. I'd like to introduce today as our speaker, Amber Bond, who is the Senior Project Director for the African American Alliance of CDFI CEOs. And Amber's going to give us just some really great information today. The Alliance is one of our partners at USBC, and so this will not be the only time that you ever see her. She'll be back in the future for us to really talk about and dig deeper into the kinds of programs that are available through the variety of CDFIs across the country. So with that, Amber, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Alisa, so much for extending the invitation for us to participate today. Personally, this is a huge passion of mine, so I'm definitely excited to share more about the Alliance, but overall to advocate for CDFIs and really the powerful tool they are for Black entrepreneurs across our country.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I think is really special about what CDFIs do is that they're not only concerned about getting you financed, that's the ultimate goal, but they really do spend time working with you if you need a little bit of assistance in the process in a way that traditional banks don't have the time to do. So can you tell me and share with us what's the mission of the African American Alliance of CDFI CEOs?
Sure. So at the core of our mission, it really is about closing the racial wealth gap, right? There are a lot of ways that we go about that strategically in our support of Black-led CDFIs, but that truly is our mission, to help from a federal standpoint, influence the redistribution of resources in an equitable fashion. And that means money, largely, right? That's one of the, when we look at some of the resources that Black entrepreneurs, Black families, Black communities have been shut out of, access to capital is at the top of every list. And it influences our ability to be successful as entrepreneurs, as business owners, to scale, and all of those different elements that are a part of running a business.
So I think that's absolutely correct in terms of really the challenges and struggles that African American business owners have, particularly when we're looking for financing. There's always sort of a hurdle, right? We might start off first with a credit card, which is usually we start the family and friends route when we start our businesses. We move to kind of the credit card phase, and then it's time to really step it up, so to speak, right? That might mean hiring people, might mean working capital, might mean equipment. And the role of CDFIs in that space, I think, is critical. Number one, because you receive financing sometimes from traditional banks, so that gives you all capital. But because of your edict as community development financial institutions, you have a mission to be able to help businesses at their most vulnerable. Share a little bit of information about what that means, how you work in the CDFI space to provide that pathway for financing.
Sure. And I'll take a little bit of a step back just because I know whenever I talk with folks, the first question they have is, what is the heck is a CDFI? What does that even mean? Where does that fit in this large landscape of lenders and banks and other institutions? And so the easiest way I like to explain it is that you have banks, right? Your big banks that serve more broad communities, right? And we know from history, this is not my speculation, from history we know that underserved populations, specifically Black communities, were excluded from participating with those big banks because they were considered higher risk, right, for small business loans, for home loans, and other access to personal credit. And so they got in trouble for that about 70 years ago, and with something called the Community Reinvestment Act that said banks, if they serve a particular region, they have to serve all populations within that region and not just pockets of, high net worth individuals here and there. And so one of the ways that banks help to serve those populations is by investing in CDFIs. And the CDFI is a community development financial institution. So the banks will say, okay, well, we won't do the higher risk lending directly, but we will invest those funds in a CDFI to help them do the work, right? So they may take $1 million in a grant or in a loan and invest that in a CDFI, and then the CDFI takes that $1 million and they break that up into, 50 or 100 small business loans to support underserved populations. And so just by nature of the statute of their certification, being a CDFI, they have to allocate at least 51% of their resources towards underserved populations. So Black communities, women, rural parts of the state, as well as some other designations. And so what we found, and what the data has shown us, is that Black-led and Black-operated CDFIs are better at reaching Black-owned businesses, partially because of proximity. We're usually located in Black communities. And then there's also just cultural awareness. We know the struggles that our small businesses face, and we become acutely aware of how we can help address those challenges. And so we can't talk about the gap in access to capital for small business credit without talking about just the wage gap, the gap in net worth, right? Because our, white counterparts, when they're looking to start a business, they can go to their friends and family and raise some startup funds, or they can use that excellent credit score to maybe get, early stage access to credit. But when we have folks that don't have some of those, they can't go to their friends and family and raise money, or maybe they did bootstrap it and use their personal credit to start their business, and now they've overextended that personal credit, or you haven't bought your first home yet, or that home doesn't have equity in it, so we don't have enough collateral to secure a loan. All of these things are what lenders or banks consider to be higher risk, right? And these are the reasons that we've been locked out of the financial system. So what CDFIs are able to do is say, okay, so maybe your credit score is less than perfect, or you don't have enough assets to fully secure the loan. We have a credit policy that allows us to go beyond what banks can. We have resources at our disposal with SBA and other programs that allow us to take on more risk. CDFIs are not regulated like banks are. So all of these things contribute to CDFIs being able to take on that additional risk, take the time to work with borrowers for that technical assistance that you mentioned. So they provide what I like to call business support services. Education, really, is what it is. So I'll stop there. Hopefully I addressed
And so let's do this. Let's talk a little bit about the journey of what a CDFI can do. You were sort of speaking my language earlier. You know, I'm a former banker. I spent a lot of time in the community development sphere, really working to help Black and minority businesses, homeowners, and the like be able to receive capital. And so this is really a subject very close and near and dear to my heart. And one of the things that I know has always been a hurdle is if you're not versed in the language that's spoken from a banking perspective, that's a really huge hurdle to overcome. And so I've always had a sense that CDFIs help to break down that language gap, right? That acronym gap, the understanding of what kinds of, financials might be needed, or business planning documents might be needed, or just the general history of your business that might be needed that helps make it easier to be able to get that loan. So can you share with us the types of funding that is available through CDFIs? What is the sort of the scope of what the Alliance does in the work that it engages with Black CDFIs across the country?
Sure. And you're absolutely right. I mean, the lending process can be very intimidating. The terminology, the requirements, I mean, they essentially want you to lift up your hood, the hood of that car, and take a deep dive and examination into all your business. and that's scary. And we know that largely, so combined with sort of that just angst, along with, knowing that 90% of applications to banks for small business loans are denied every day, right? So we know the ratios are already against us. We know we have some higher risk factors, and there's some angst about the process. And so that's, I think, why I continue to advocate for folks seeking a CDFI in their area first, because we understand, right? We exist to educate and to provide capital. So you can kind of let your guard down a little bit and embrace not knowing what you don't know, because they're also there to provide that sort of bridge of understanding prior to the access of capital if it's needed. As far as CDFIs, every CDFI has a focus, so you can get that designation by focusing on small businesses as a loan fund. Also affordable housing. So we have 60 members. All of them have a different focus. Most of them are in the small business space, but there are several that do affordable housing. There's also commercial redevelopment. So if you see, in your local community, there's a building that, has been sort of run down and abandoned or what have you, and someone comes in, rehabilitates it, maybe puts businesses on the first floor and some apartments on the second floor. That's that commercial redevelopment that some of our members do. And then we actually have a venture capital fund as well. You can be a CDFI that's a venture capitalist fund. So our membership represents all four of those focus areas, but most of them are in the small business space.
And I think that's what's really wonderful about our partnership with you, because you touch all of what I would call the tiers of capital, right? From the lowest level, which might be a $5,000 to $10,000 loan to get started, to the equity space, right? Where it is about a portion of, the business owner providing a portion of their business to their venture capitalists, but also created in a way that's going to be beneficial for both to succeed. And I think that really is the difference when we talk about this, that not that banks don't want us to win. I don't mean it that way. But there seems to be more vested in a CDFI building relationships of trust, building avenues for businesses to be thinking about, say, short-term capital versus long-term capital, and the type of financing vehicle that should be aligned to that, right? So if you're buying a car, you should not, use a credit card to do that, right? You should be going for, longer term, whether it's equipment loan or an auto loan or whatever it might be. You want to be able to match your capital. You want to be able to match the loan to the type of need that you have, the type of financing need that you have, and distinguishing between short-term and long-term, I think, is always important.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. So yes, I can spend a second just sort of talking about the two. I call them two, well, really three buckets, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you've got term loans, which is, you may be familiar with, if you buy a personal vehicle, right? You borrow $30,000 and you pay it back each month, principal and interest, until it's paid off. That's the typical structure of a term loan. And then you have a line of credit. So your lines of credit are for revolving working capital needs. So let's say you're a business that is a commercial cleaning company. You go out, you do the work, you perform the service, then you bill your client and you give them 30 days to pay you, right? So you've had to endure or incur all of those upfront costs, and you don't get paid for 30 or 60 days. And so you got to pay payroll, you got to pay for supplies and gas and all those things in between that 30 days where it takes you to get paid for the work that you did. You are a service-based company that needs revolving working capital, because the more you grow, the more clients you get, the bigger that cash flow and liquidity need is all the time. And so just kind of having that baseline understanding and going, oh man, that's me. You don't really need a term loan necessarily. You need access to a revolving structure so that your business can grow and you have the money at hand that you need to grow your business. And CDFIs can do both of those. And then you have your short-term debt and long-term debt. Let's say you are looking to buy the space that you're currently leasing. That's a long-term debt, a long-term debt need. So you're looking at, 20 years to pay that loan off, versus short term, maybe you're just looking for some equipment, maybe you're just leasing a space, so you need to do some improvements, you need to paint, new flooring, buy some equipment, and you're looking for a loan maybe to repay over 5 years or 6 years. And so all three of those different types of capital needs CDFIs can address.
And so what it shows me, and hopefully what it shows those who are listening to this today, is that CDFIs do a lot of similar lending that banks do, right? And so all the more for us to really be able to leverage this tool that banks do support. I know many banks who have invested in CDFIs. And traditionally, even in the past year or so, as we've gone through the pandemic, those investments have increased. And so there is money out there to be able to go to a CDFI lender. A lot of the PPP financing and some of the idle financing also came through CDFIs. So there's an SBA lending component to this. So basically, CDFIs can really satisfy our needs. So as we're thinking about that, one of the things that I often say to businesses, and that I think is important, relationships are important. Building relationships are important. A lot of times that we have seen is that, we'll have a great business opportunity, like say we got a new contract, for instance. And so now as you're trying to gear up for it, you recognize, to your point, your, payment terms might be, 45 to 60 days as opposed to, say, 15 to 30. And how are you going to fill that gap? The challenge is that we won the contract, and now we're worried about that financing piece. And what I want people to begin to think about is building those relationships ahead of time, so that when you have a need, it doesn't feel very last minute, it doesn't feel rushed, and your CDFI provider can really help you through that. Can you talk about what it means to begin a relationship with the CDFI lender, and how that process works along the way, not just when you have a need, but again, in that business services space? That's always important to help you build up to that financing side.
Sure, yes, and I think you make a great point that it's important to establish those relationships as early as possible, because typically it may take a little time to access that capital, right? We have to see maybe what areas we need to reinforce before we can get there. And so the earlier you're able to reach out, most of the organizations have something called a business development officer, that business services specialist. They can take on a number of titles, but when you reach out, you just want to say, I'm a small business in the community. I want to connect to resources. And that's the first statement that'll get you to the right person. And that individual can really run through an assessment. Hey, tell me about your business. Tell me about what you have going on. And just be very honest and transparent with them. I've been in business for about a year. I just got registered as, a hub certified business, so I'm pursuing new contracts. I don't have anything in hand yet, but I definitely want to prepare myself when an opportunity comes. And they say, great, let me get you on our mailing list and let me get you access to our calendar of seminars and webinars and whatever other, resource tools they have available. And so you can start working with that person right then, and they'll ask you questions about your finances. I meet so many small businesses that are upfront and say, finances are like Greek. What's cash flow? I don't know. Here's my tax return. You tell me, and that's okay. If financial management is not your jam, you definitely want to get to them early so that they can help you establish a baseline understanding. They can get a really strong grip in understanding your cash flow needs so that when it is time to apply, you're a little bit ahead of the curve because they're already aware of who you are, what you do, and have a baseline understanding of your cash flow. And so all of that can happen before you have a borrowing need in place. And it's free most of the time. All that is free.
Yeah, I think, you really bring up a good point there. The ability to get that service, particularly when we're talking about financials, because that is really where the rubber meets the road, right? That is really where there's so much angst, right? And there's so much fear to some degree. And sometimes sort of this feeling of, I know I don't really have it all together, and I don't necessarily want to show that. I think that is a huge difference between what banks are able to offer and what CDFIs are able to offer, because CDFIs are specializing in that space to be able to get you ready, get you prepared. I specifically talked about it in the contracting space because I mentioned, USBC has 5 pillars, but 3 of those, which I call kind of our center pillars, are access to capital, contracting, and educational entrepreneurial development. And so those 3 things are exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about that service of CDFIs in this process. This year, we really want to help our businesses through, you heard us talk a little bit about our Buy Black certification program. The ability for us to have the first Black certification, not minority, but Black certification, is really huge in this space. And the idea of that is to really help businesses get into that contracting space as a quick way of being able to drive revenue. But we also know that financing is a critical component. And so I'm really tying these 3 things together because as we look at the work that we want to do throughout this year with you, it's going to focus a lot, in that space as we work with our Black CDFIs to really help our businesses, understand what they're really going to need. Almost, again, we talk about kitchen cabinets in the banking area. I view the CDFI as the kitchen cabinet. The accounting system is there. The guidance and the counsel is there. They have referrals to, pro bono attorneys and the like. So the network, as we work with you and as we have our own, that network is what really is sustaining businesses, and particularly Black-owned businesses, to be able to get that lift and that leg up, to be able to obtain the financing that they need.
Oh, yeah. And CDFIs are generally very tapped into local ecosystems as it relates to small business support. So, so even if you go to the CDFI and you're not, you just want to get on their radar and you're not ready, there's so many different, as you mentioned, places that they can refer you to for different things. And so it's just a great starting point. It's just a great starting point to learn more, to understand, and to get ready and prepare for your capital. Generally, your banks are going to expect you to come in the door ready. CDFIs are expecting for you to need some help to get there. And so that just knowing that, right, they're not expecting me to be all my T's to be crossed and all my I's to be dotted. They're expecting to work with me, can just help you let your guard down a little bit and enter that process knowing that they're there to support you. They're there to be a trusted guide through the process.
So one of the reasons for this conversation is I want to take the mystery out of what it means to go in and look for financing, right? To really have a sense of confidence in that process. Can we talk a little bit about what it means when you walk in the door, or you're on the phone, or you're online with the CDFI in terms of those steps? Most times I always talk to my business owners about understanding your story. That your story as a business owner, as the visionary for your business, you are the one who's holding the keys and the history and the knowledge about how your business works. And usually, if you have that story together, you can kind of get additional help along the way. So, say I walk in, I, have a e-commerce store online. I'm selling, candles, for instance, right? And my inventory levels are, they're good. Like, the candles are just running out the door. And I don't really have time. I've got QuickBooks. QuickBooks is tracking my sales, right? I'm able to kind of get my expenses underway because some of that will come through if I'm shipping. But the whole picture of what it is I do and where it is I can go, I might not have all of that. If I walked into a CDFI, what is the guidance that I'm going to receive as that business owner trying to take it to the next level?
Sure, that's a great example too. That's a great example. So I think the first step is going to be helping you to understand whether or not you're making money, right? That's the basis of it. Because if you are not profitable yet, we can help you understand and introduce you to some strategies to get there. But if you're not profitable, taking on a loan could be worse for your business than saying no, not yet. So I think the first thing you're going to do is say, wow, this is really awesome. I'm so glad to see that your sales are growing. Let's take a look under the hood. If we say, can you give me, you're using QuickBooks, give me that printout, and we see, for example, that only shipping expenses are coming out, but there's no, your materials costs for making the candles, or your label printing, or, anything, none of the rest of that stuff. Maybe you have your cousin that comes and helps you with some of the packaging, and you don't see you're paying them through Cash App, right? So we don't see that contractor cost running through your profit and loss statement. So we're going to listen to your story because, like you said, you know everything. It's all up here. So I'm going to listen to your story. Okay, she has her cousin that comes twice a week to help. Okay, I don't see that in her P&L. She says she has a vendor where she buys the wax from and the scented oils. I don't see that on her profit and loss. So I'm first going to start to build that out for you. Okay, so how can you help me understand what this cost truly is? And then you're going to have to do some work, right? We're going to have to go through your Cash App and look at those transactions and aggregate that together. So once we have a healthy understanding of, is the business profitable? You may say, okay, it is. For every candle you sell for $10 on average, the money in your pocket is $2, let's say. So 20% profit margin on the sale of that candle. Okay, and then you say, all right, I have an opportunity from Walmart. They want to put me in regional stores. So I have this purchase order coming, and I know it's going to be at least 200 units, right? Okay, well, now that we know you have a 20% profit margin on the sale of your product, we can back into a payment structure that won't suffocate your cash flow, right? But I won't know that. I can't structure that properly for you until I know if it's profitable and by how much. So never be afraid of that. Like I said, that look under the hood, be honest, be totally honest, because the conversation could be, wow, you're not making money, and we don't want to put you in further debt or have you sell 200 units to Walmart at a loss, right? We don't want that. So we have to have that conversation first. Then we say, okay, let's take a look at what the business can afford and see if we can help you with a loan. And there's an application process. So you're going to have to provide some information. provide, your tax returns, personal and business, if they're separate. We may have to do what they call a personal cash flow. So maybe you're working doing the candles part-time and you've got a part-time or full-time job. So let's look at, your income, your personal net worth, what assets you may have, and then we can go from there and figure out a structure that really works for you.
And I think the beauty of that too is you're learning along the way, so it doesn't feel as scary. It doesn't feel as onerous in the process, and you're getting everything lined up, so that now you have Walmart, but now you get Target,
Right.
or you get a smaller boutique firm, and because that service has been provided, it really makes a difference. Wanted to ask you, did you have anything that you wanted to share with those who are joining us today about the CDFI process or about CDFIs in general? Did you have a deck or anything you wanted to share?
Sure. I'd love to share a little bit about AAA in general so that you're aware and familiar with the organization and what we do. And then, also give you our website so that if you say, okay, I've got to find a CDFI near me, you have an easy access point to look at our membership and within your state and then be able to contact them. So I know some of the AAA information I've already shared, so I won't take that much time if that's okay, but I'd still like to share a little more. Okay, great. We do that, and I'll run through this really quickly, and then if the folks have questions from the audience or if there's anything else you'd like me to elaborate on, I'm happy to do that. First,
absolutely. And just so everyone knows, we have a list of the CDFIs that are part of the African American Alliance on our website. And so when we typically after these sessions, we will download that document and send it out to you, as well as a link to where you can find additional information.
Awesome. Okay, I'll be brief then. So we're the African American Alliance of CDFI CEOs. And essentially in 2018, a small group of Black-led CDFI CEOs through their own networks got together and really said, wow, we've got some shared challenges. There are definitely some things that we all need, and we can learn from one another. How do we formalize these relationships that so that it can really impact the folks that we serve? And just to show you in service of the small businesses, but the struggles that Black-led CDFIs face, truly, just like there's a gap in the net worth of white households compared to Black households, our balance sheets are the same. We see a significant gap in the asset size and asset growth of Black-led CDFIs when compared to our white counterparts. So truly the disparities of the small businesses that we serve, we face as well. And so we came together and said, let's go after some really stabilized capital for our organizations. We want it to be low cost so that we can pass those savings on to the small businesses that we serve. We need some alliances around technology infrastructure so that our processes can be really efficient. We want to learn from another so that we can give better services to our businesses. And then we want greater access to CDFI fund programming. And so back to what I mentioned very early on, we really exist to help close that racial wealth gap and to identify opportunities for greater investments in our organizations. I touched on this as well, but we have our 60 members that are in the CDFI space for small business, affordable housing, that real estate development, that technical assistance or education, and in the healthcare sectors. We have a very ambitious goal, right? We want to raise money. We're calling it the Black Renaissance Fund. So we're going after $100 million within 8 years as pass-through opportunities to our organizations for debt and equity and grants so that they can increase their capacity to serve you all. Our mission statement comes back to really 3 pillars. So we exist to help build capacity, bridges, and power for our CEOs and to leverage what they're doing in their communities. We recently finished our strategic plan, and out of that came our 3 Theories of change centers around being a collective community voice, taking action, and working towards economic liberation and freedom. So underneath that sort of theory of change is our pillars. Again, the building capacity, bridges, and power. And what that means is we want to help reinforce our CEOs with educational opportunities for themselves and as it relates to professional development. We want to be that access to capital for their organizations. We want to build bridges to other resources, and all leading to building power within Black communities. So we're a relatively young organization. We became a 501c3 in early 2020. And in this little tiny bit of time, we've been working very hard. So we have a women's initiative that focuses on our Black and female CEOs and specific programming to support them as double minorities in this space. We developed an impact scorecard in conjunction with the CDFI in California to help our industry really reorient and think about what it means for impact investing. And then we have several programs for our CEOs, one of which is the Building High Impact CDFIs of Color. We foster working relationships with all the alphabet soup acronym folks, EDA, SBA, MBDA, again, so that we're raising awareness and have that advocacy happening for our organization. We've been able to raise money from a growing list of 18 investors who believe in the work that we're doing. And then that's just a little statistic down there about, you mentioned, Alisa, about PPP and how active CDFIs were in round two. We were able to deliver $4.4 billion in PPP loans in round two. We produced a publication, so a lot of the work that we do is around advocacy at a federal level. So we've done publications that we believe really helped for that additional funding to come to CDFIs, and continue to work and advocate around CRA reform, home ownership, and a number of other initiatives. So I kind of breezed through that really quickly. I didn't want to take up too much time, but definitely wanted to help you guys understand, why we're here. Even though we don't serve small businesses directly, the work that we're doing really is to benefit you and to help you in the great strides you're taking in your communities as entrepreneurs and small business owners. Thank you for that.
Thank you for that, Amber. Before we go to questions, a couple of things. I want everyone to know the reason that we're doing this webinar, and we'll continue to do more, is that we want you to be thinking now about what your next steps are as you're moving forward. And some of that might mean that you need capital. And if you do, how best we can serve you doing that. And so this conversation is really about that today. Amber, can you tell us maybe the top 3 areas of guidance that you would provide to businesses that are seeking capital? Because I really want our businesses to not be afraid in this moment, to really, in order to grow, it does require a little bit of what I would call knowledgeable risk, right? We understand the risk and reward of what we're doing as business owners and what our next steps are going to be, but we also need help in getting there. And so can you tell us a little bit about what kinds of guidance do you give businesses that are seeking to go through those next steps, and how best they can begin to seek capital with the CDFI?
Sure. So in terms of just like topic coverage, which I think is your question, my top 3 are always going to be the first things I'm going to want to make sure that my client, my small business owner that I'm coaching understands. And one of those is taxes and tax planning. I know your dream didn't include giving Uncle Sam 40%. I know. But we have to deal with our taxes. We have to deal with the IRS. And the better educated you are about the right way to go about that as it relates to payroll taxes and income taxes. So that's always going to be a hot topic. Do you have a good tax person? And if not, let's get you one. The other is going to be on structuring your entity. I think a lot of us tend to go towards that sole proprietorship or that LLC because that's what we've heard, right? That's just kind of the thing that we hear about the most. But taking a look at the other structures that are available, is an S Corp better for you? Is a C Corp better for you and the vision that you have. And so taking our time to understand all those different entity structures and what it means for you as a business. And then the third is that cash flow. Have to come back to the money. Do you understand? Are your price points okay? Are you profitable? Are you poised to be able to scale and understanding your cash flow? So those are always going to be the three things that I think are really critical. In terms of next steps, again, contact that local CDFI and just tell them I'm a business located in this place. This is what I do. What do you have available for me? It could be that simple. Just start there. What do you have available for me? And I guarantee you they'll be happy to help. They'll have information. Some of them have these on-demand learning tools, so you don't even have to show up. They do night classes if you're working and taking care of your family. They have some really flexibly scheduled opportunities for you. But if you just say, what can you do to help? I haven't started yet. I have a great idea, and I want to learn how I can turn my idea into a business. They have learning academies, they have cohorts, all kinds of great things to help meet you where you are. So I would say that's the first step.
Well, thank you so much for those tips. We're going to jump right into the questions. Yvonne, Cameron, I'm not going to ask your first question because I think Amber's answered it. But your second question, that your income, the income made is rolled back into your company. So it looks like there's profit, but it's going right back into growth. Many business owners do the same thing. How do you get off the hamster wheel? So some of what you're talking about is kind of this reinvestment in your business, but it also sort of saps that cash flow because you're reinvesting and trying to, whether you're getting more employees or you're buying more product or you're marketing, whatever that might be. What's your thought about what that reinvestment quotient should probably be?
Sure. So you can be profitable and cash poor, right? Those two things are not mutually exclusive. So you can be pricing things well, and you can be in that situation that we talked about earlier where you're spending more on the front end, or it takes longer for you to get paid. So the more you grow, the more your expenses, start to accrue. And so you're profitable, but your liquidity is really low. So I would say don't keep going down that rabbit hole. You definitely want to, now's the time to go talk to a CDFI and explain what you're experiencing, because you're probably a perfect candidate for a line of credit or some other type of debt facility that can help you through that cash flow cycle so that you're not, payroll every other week is like, oh, how am I going to do this? So talk to your CDFI, tell them that you're profitable, but your cash is running low, and you need to look at probably a line of credit for your business.
So our next question comes from Reginald Davis. Reginald says he's invested $25,000 of his own money into his business, and now he needs funds to start his manufacturing process. Would his investment help in the decision process to secure a line of credit? Because again, we're talking about his equity, right? We always talk about having skin in the game, right? And so again, depending on how much you're borrowing, what is that percentage of skin in the game, and what does it mean when you're looking for a credit decision?
Sure. So most, I can't overgeneralize and say all, but most CDFIs are going to look for there to be about a 10% equity injection towards the project. So yeah, that $25,000 will definitely count towards that. Again, I'd say talk to someone as soon as possible, because maybe you wouldn't have had to do 25,000. Maybe 10,000 would have been enough, and you could have gotten the other 15 in a borrowing structure. It really just depends. But we always like to see that the business owner is fully invested. When people ask for 100% financing, the question on the back end always comes, especially if they have the ability to make the injection and they don't want to. The question is always, well, why would you want us to risk more than you're willing to risk in your business? So the fact that you've done that investment is a huge sign to the lender that you're in it. You're in it.
Markela's question is, once you've successfully been accepted to receive funds, how long does it take to get them, into your pocket, into your bank account?
So that can depend on the use of funds. If you are, let's say, borrowing working capital, right? You just payroll, rent, and just some immediate expenses for your business, you can make they call it a disbursement. You can be dispersed at closing. So you sign those closing documents. You say maybe it's a $20,000 loan, but you need $5,000 right away. You sign your closing documents. I need $5,000 for XXX. You submit that borrowing need, and they give you the disbursement the same day. If you have something where you have equipment, you're purchasing equipment, if you've provided the documentation to them ahead of time, let's say it's something really big and there's a bill of sale. If you've given them the bill of sale ahead of closing, they'll pay that vendor directly. So you don't even have to see it; it just goes straight to them. If it's, you're improving a space to open your business, so there's a contractor involved or something like that, it may be a little slower release because you always have to provide evidence that whatever you're borrowing the money for, it's either going directly to that vendor or it's a short time between your hands and the purchase.
No, that all makes sense. Are there any other questions before we close this out? I see one more, Chandria Thomas. I've been using my personal income to fund my business. What's next for me? I want to stop using my personal income and I'm in need of the right people to assist. Where do I go from here?
So the first step is understanding what your borrowing need is, right? So if you've been using your personal income for, supplies or materials to make your inventory, then you again may need a line of credit because you're going to have those expenses every month. If you've been using your personal income to buy tools and different things like that, you may be a candidate for a longer term loan, right? And you just want to buy some more or upgrade the equipment you have, larger, more high capacity equipment. So I think first is understanding what your borrowing need is beyond what you've been investing from your own income. But again, that starts with that conversation with the business development officer. Hey, I'm spending $10K a month on my business, whatever the number is. Every time I get paid, half of that is going into the business. Well, let's find out if your price point is creating profit or if it's creating a hole that you have to fill with your personal income. And all of that is exercises that you can do with that business development officer.
Absolutely. Well, Amber, I want to thank you so much for taking time with us today, for a great conversation. I want everyone to know Amber will be back. We're going to be doing sort of a series of these things. And so we want to sort of, the goal for us here is to really kind of take you through steps. So today we talked really about how you engage. Our next session, we're going to talk a little bit about the process itself, because I think sometimes at the end of the day, a lending process still is sometimes about what we'll call the checks and balances, but it's also about the checklist as part of that, and meeting those items in the checklist, regardless of whether it's a bank or it's a CDFI. There are still areas that we have to be able to provide to them in order for them to do their best for us. I saw some of you ask questions about, where you can find a CDFI. As I mentioned, we're going to send the list out to you that we've gotten from the Alliance. And so you'll have that. The other thing I want to let you know too, and Amber, you probably can speak a little bit more intelligently to this than me. There are CDFIs that are local, there are CDFIs that are regional, and there are CDFIs that are national, not unlike banks themselves. Tell me a little bit about that, because I know sometimes a person might be looking in a particular area, but they might find a CDFI that covers their market as well.
Oh, yes. So a CDFI can exist just to focus on an area as small as a neighborhood, all the way up to a city, county, state, or multiple states. So it just depends. I think if you let us know, where you are, we can, we can help match you as closely as possible. for that. But yes, some of them, like I said, exist for neighborhoods and on up.
Well, again, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. Looking forward to our ongoing discussions on this. And I'm also looking forward to those of you who are on the call, those of you that will probably watch this later. I'm looking for you to begin to think about what your needs are going to be for us to step out and really think about what does growth look like and how am I going to get there, and leveraging our Black CDFIs to help us move the needle. So thank you everyone for coming today. Please don't forget to visit usblackchambers.org. We have a number of webinars coming up. We are excited that we are part of the SBA's Community Navigator program, where it literally is our chambers on the ground serving you all day in, day out with CFIs like the Alliance as part of our ecosystem. So we're excited about that. We also want you to onboard to our directory or certify your business at byblack.us, byblack.us. And just, continue to join us. And we have lots of really great information coming on board. There are lots of partners that we've been able to work with that every once in a while there might be a grant program that comes out. There might be, some other program that will be beneficial to your business. So stay in touch with us, keep watching us, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It was really great to talk with you guys today.
Thank you both, and we are ending now. Thank you.